Hey, in all its regalia, it is the Sixers Talk podcast, dressed to the nines, ready to deliver the news and action to you about this 76ers team. Danny Pommells and Noah Levick here, along with Ben Barry. And Noah, here we are in the midst of this 3-1 stretch, kind of this mini break the Sixers are enjoying before the Bucks game. We're processing things, trying to get our handle on what's going on here around the NBA. We're going to talk a little bit about the net situation and Kyrie and Ben Simmons. But let's focus on the Sixers here to get things started. You were at practice. A few guys were missing, but nothing to make a big deal about, right?
I guess it's a subjective question, but Furkan Korkmaz and Doc Rivers' estimation will, in all likelihood, miss another game or two here with the left knee injury. And Matisse Thybulle did not practice because of a tweaked ankle, and he did originally sprain his right ankle back on the 2nd against the Knicks. So wouldn't stun me if Thybulle was unavailable on Friday, but definitely not a sense that anything is a great concern. And the bottom line here is they knew they were going to be without James Harden for a while. So it does hurt whenever they're a little shorthanded in terms of perimeter players. And even Furkan Korkmaz, though he's been very low in this pecking order, is capable of handling the ball and actually had a very nice performance the last time he took the floor with a few flashy layups. So they'll miss him, but I think no more Korkmaz for a couple more games isn't the end of the world for the Sixers. And they'll be, I think, similar to the team we last saw when they are back in action on Friday. And that team was good enough to beat the Utah Jazz, although, of course, 59 points were required from a certain Joel Embiid, and that is not going to be the norm, we assume, every single night.
Yeah, we saw Korkmaz Euro stepping his way to 6 points. I actually rewound the game a couple times. I'm like, man, he traveled right there. He had to hit travel, but just 2 steps and a funky layup from Korkmaz. Too bad we were. He got banged up in that game. We were might have been treated to something because it looked like he had it going on against Atlanta. Sometimes that change of pace, you know what I'm saying? Takes a team, catches a team off guard. Noah, you are fantastic at getting the articles up on the website. You have a few of them there. And, this 3-1 stretch, I feel like they were the Philadelphia 59ers for like 4 days because of Joel Embiid's performance. They weren't the 76ers there for a couple of days. Just everyone talking about that 59-point performance and how it, affected them where they were and things like that, and rightfully so. But you point the finger at not necessarily, what they, that performance, which led them to one of the victories, but that this really is 3-1 stretch centers around the defense playing strong and the adjustments they've been able to make there. Let's break that down a little bit more. What exactly have you been seeing, and what were the adjustments that the team has made to try to make sure that they're, better, stopping teams? And, particularly that Jazz game stands out. I mentioned it on the last podcast when we were at Rivers Casino that, that Jazz team was scoring like 119 points a game, and they didn't get anywhere near that.
Right. I don't think it's been a ton of dramatic adjustments, but some notable tweaks. Sixers in that 3-1 stretch over the last 4, the NBA's best defensive rating per cleaning the glass. And you look at their first 10 games, they ranked 21st in that category. So that's a pretty dramatic improvement. Joel Embiid alluded to it a couple of times, but just heading into the year, there certainly was a greater willingness to switch. And now it's more, let's go back to what's worked for us in the past, where Joel Embiid is an elite rim protector, and we're going to lean on that. And in our pick and roll defense, he's going to be at the level of the screen as opposed to having any regular responsibilities in terms of switching. What's actually interesting, though, yesterday, Doc Rivers noted, I think like every time out of timeouts, they do want to switch on ball screens. I think that is a consistent principle. But besides that, it's generally switching 1 through 4 and letting Embiid do his thing on the back line. And then also the transition defense, I think, deserves a shout out here. We, I think, correctly castigated them for being rather abysmal in transition defense. And you look now, they're still bottom 10, but it took a lot of work to no longer be a bottom 5 team in that category after they started the year by far the worst in the league. And George Niang, I thought it was telling, recalled that Rivers at one point said, if you don't get back on defense, I might take you out of the game. And I do think that was justified. It's kind of a high school, middle school style of coaching where you're having to threaten punishment of players for not doing the basics, but the Sixers were so bad in transition defense, and it was so obviously their primary issue early in the season that that message needed to be sent. I think it's been well received. Of course, some of the early hard stats there are just teams like the Boston Celtics on opening night being white hot on those transition three-pointers and sort of scoring at an unsustainably great pace. But a lot of this was within the Sixers' control. They've been more diligent about just loading up, matching up with someone, even if it's not your man. And I think the improvement recently, part of it's the half-court tweaks, but a lot of it's just let's actually care about transition defense and play the way we're capable of and not give opponents a lot of easy chances to score against us. So, yeah, Joel Embiid deserves a large share of the credit for the recent Sixers success, but the best defensive team in the NBA, that's not all one player. That is indeed a group effort, and that's a big, big factor for the Sixers here.
Yeah, and it's it's weird to, like you said, think that sometimes you have to break it down to the most common denominator and the lowest decimal, so to speak. And listen, if it's going to be punitive, if you're not getting back on defense, then you're coming out of the game. And on top of that, it's really drumming up the fundamentals and really pinpointing those things that getting over the top on screens and not going under, or just the communication. And it's something you pointed out that Doc Rivers was saying, listen, if our guards aren't talking, how's the rest of the team going to take that initiative to start talking and communicating on defense and calling out switches and screens, or just simple things as calling out screens. So I think that it seems like over exaggerated in a sense, but that's the thing that builds up the foundation of all the defensive schemes and sets and all the things they want to run, are those fundamental things, those little basic things. And it's early in the season to need a refresher on that, and it's early to have to make those adjustments, but it's also too early to be losing games because of it. It's too early to be letting those things rear their ugly heads, so to speak, because it's been past issues that things that they've had to deal with for a good while. And that communication thing seemed like something that Doc was really upset about and wanted to make sure the players responded to that.
Yeah, I do think also, like, when Joel Embiid is not on the court, you're having to do a lot more difficult and not especially desirable communication. We saw a lot of these games, or a few of these games, where the Sixers tried to execute these scram switches, these late switches, when obviously they did not want, Kristaps Porzingis on Daniel House in the post. And that requires, I think, much more precision than just, all right, we've got our base defense and we know how this works. And sure, we need to communicate, when something breaks down, when a guard gets to the middle against us, and we need to call out something that's not the norm. But by and large, we know what we're doing. Whereas when Embiid's not on the court, you have to make these adjustments for his absence. And it's not easy to be switching 1 through 5 in those PJ Tucker at center lineups, or to be calling out those scram switches, or to be throwing in zone with players who haven't, shared the floor together in a zone defense. So it is difficult to overstate how much Embiid helps and how much easier he makes things for everyone else. But also, I think not a small deal that they've noticed that Joel Embiid as a rim protector works really well, and sure, he can switch out onto a stretch 5 when he needs to, but there's no reason to deviate from what's been so effective for you in the past. I think returning to that comfortable area has yielded immediate rewards for this team. as far as getting over the screens, it's an interesting topic. And I was actually a little surprised to hear Doc Rivers say it's just every single guard has that responsibility. I think that's a plus in terms of clarity and in terms of the communication not being especially tricky. But boy, like that sounds a lot better when it's DeAnthony Melton trying to get over the screen than a Tyrese Maxey. So I think for the time being, Rivers likes the notion of having confidence in his players and also just the simplicity. But obviously, most defenses have a strong core and strong key rules, but they're willing to deviate. So I think the Sixers will be tested there at times when Tyrese Maxey is just getting beat over and over in pick and roll defense. And okay, it might be on Doc Rivers and the Sixers and Dan Burke to come up with some ways to respond to that issue. But for the time being, they seem confident in what they're doing. They seem clear in it. The communication isn't that hard. They're being active in that respect. And this has been a major improvement, and they really needed it to be. Yeah.
And I guess Joel Embiid makes up for all defensive liabilities as that last line of defense. So if Maxey is having trouble getting over the screens and, suddenly he's on his man's hip, then there's Joel to be the deterrent, which, anchoring the defense there in front of the basket. Hey, we're brought to you by Wilmington University. Learn how you can save time and tuition dollars with Wilmington University's new dual credit advantage. Go to wilmu.edu/dual credit. And some dual credit needs to be given to Tobias Harris. Another article up on the website. You have PJ Tucker, really singing his praises, his versatility, his willingness to do whatever is required of him, is willing to forego some of his personal, comfort and, just what plays to his skill set and, scoring the basketball, playing more catch and shoot basketball. Was that an easy article to put together for you? Meaning it seemed like PJ was really giving you a lot of fodder for, why Tobias deserves a lot of credit for how the Sixers have been able to be more interchangeable because he's willing to do whatever it takes to help the team win.
I guess yes and no. Yeah, I think PJ Tucker is such a veteran himself that it is his expectation that his teammates have a team first mindset. But no doubt it was noticeable that he's already impressed with, I think, Tobias Harris's willingness to sacrifice. And PJ Tucker, of course, has matched up against Tobias Harris a bunch and understands that he's capable of a lot more than he's doing on this team, where the role, when everyone's healthy, is mostly just catch and shoot and take advantage of the occasional mismatch. Like Harris and Tucker, when they've gone against each other, sometimes that's included a much higher usage and much more of Tobias Harris's bag of tricks. So, Tucker does appreciate that, no doubt. I think he also got a kick out of Harris's strength in the post and his ability to hold his own there in a way that's not the most common across the league nowadays, just because players aren't usually tested down low. But PJ Tucker and Harris, I think, both come from this era where, in the early 2010s, you needed to be able to show your muscle when someone tried to test it in the mid-post area. So, nothing I think that PJ Tucker hasn't seen before because he's seen literally everything. But I think he does have this mutual respect, him and Tobias, where they know it's just all about the team. It's all about playoff success and just providing, I think, consistency, and exactly what you're going to get from these two guys. Hasn't always worked out great. There are certainly questions about whether the small ball lineups can hold up defensively, even with these guys being savvy and strong defenders down low. But I think mindset and attitude-wise, the signs are quite encouraging early, and the Sixers are going to lean on these two vets for just consistency on a team where, honestly, there's already been a lot of volatility, and we can probably expect more. James Harden and Joel Embiid in and out of the lineup with the injuries and the illnesses, and some of these fluctuations in the defensive performance. It might not be flashy much of the time from Harris and Tucker, but I think at least they can be counted on for consistent effort and consistent approach.
Yeah, definitely. And as much as PJ Tucker has been labeled, the guy who, does all the things that don't show up in the box score and for being a glue guy, Tobias Harris has already been that for the 76ers team. And if the money wasn't what the money is, and that didn't affect people so much, I think he would get more praise and adoration from fans because of, what he's willing to do, what he's willing to sacrifice. He obviously plays hard. You talked about his versatility with the back to the basket game, as well as, shooting threes. And, he definitely has sacrificed a lot of what he does personally, because I don't, if that was his prime, a few years back, maybe the, part of his prime, this could still be his prime, but I mean that in the sense that he's not getting, the feature role or the opportunities that he has gotten, in years past, and particularly before he came over to the 76ers. So it's just, I say that to say, like, he's sacrificing his game in a way that you will want someone who joins a team or wants to win a championship is willing to sacrifice for. And I think if money wasn't what it was, he would get more attention and praise for that. And I think fans appreciate it, but I think the money kind of gets in the way of people giving him the full money of what he's been doing and what he's capable of.
Absolutely. And I think honestly, would not at all be surprising if a similar thing unfolds with PJ Tucker, because it's a 3-year contract for a 37-year-old for the full mid-level exception. And that is
averaging 3 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists a game.
Right. Yeah. And it's just a high bar to meet that you were worthy of that. And I think it's also easy to say the Sixers should have used that money in X, Y, or Z different ways and not, made the investment in PJ Tucker. I think for him, like statistically or usage-wise, there's zero concern on his end. And for me, I don't really look at that and care about it at this stage, because they got him for the playoffs. And they got him for culture and toughness and all of that stuff. But, like, not that we should tune out these games or not care, but PJ Tucker is here because of the hope that he can give them a better chance to win playoff games. So in all likelihood, one aspect of that is the small ball center ability. That's worth tracking throughout the year and seeing how those lineups fare and seeing whether Tucker can develop good chemistry with his teammates in those situations. And the culture part is important. I think him having mutual respect with Tobias Harris already is a good sign. I think him developing relationships with younger guys like Tyrese Maxey, who he gets a kick out of just with his constant joy, that's positive. You want him knocking down the catch and shoot threes, but even the percentages, which are really good right now, are borderline irrelevant because the volume is so darn low. So PJ Tucker, he's going to be steady and he's going to know all the ins and outs of the game. And not much of it matters right now until the playoffs get here. And they're a long way away. So PJ Tucker in that contract and Tobias Harris in his contract will be judged by far the most when the games are actually really high stakes in the postseason.
Yeah, you bring them in for the familiarity with Harden and the other pieces and Harrell and House. And you bring them in for those playoff possessions and those moments that, when it boils down to, who wants it most and his will and his, experience and things like that. So, yeah, the numbers may not reflect the money for sure. But like you said, that's sort of irrelevant, particularly because of the bad taste in people's mouths from so many players they've tried to trot out at that backup center position that haven't worked out. And Drummond and DeAndre Jordan and Greg Monroe and, all those guys that they've given opportunities to behind Joel Embiid. So I do want to pass along that if you are injured for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. We're watching the Sixers kind of develop their sea legs, so to speak, here as they're on this 3-1 stretch. This Bucks game will be a big measuring stick once again. And I don't think it would be as big a measuring stick if they could have snagged one of those 2 games earlier in the season against the Celtics and the Bucks, which were close, but the Sixers, didn't have enough to, get the W. The Bucks game will be a big measuring stick, but unlike the Bucks, the Sixers are a team that are trying to bring it together after a slow start for various reasons, injuries, and guys missing time for other things. So I think that when you look at the Sixers at 7-7, it could be worse because you look at what the Nets are going through and how they're trying to, bring it all together. Should they trade KD? Should they trade Kyrie? When is Kyrie coming back? What the heck is going on with Ben Simmons? And we get this news that Kyrie is I honestly thought there was a chance he might retire. I honestly thought there was a chance that he just wouldn't come back. But we were getting word that he's almost finished completing the requirements that the team wants him to do to come back from the suspension that he's been on because of the movie that he supported on his Instagram story and then didn't really walk it back in the way that they wanted in regards to the anti-Semitic undertones and overtones of the movie. We get word about this Ben Simmons situation that the team's upset about. There's reports out there that they're upset allegedly about his passion and how much he wants to play and things like that. So it could be worse. I think is my point. And with this Nets situation, is that one of the teams you think can turn it around? Do you still feel like there's hope there that it can be more about basketball than the ancillary things that are kind of floating through the organization? Because, I mean, I've said it in the past, the NBA is better when Ben Simmons is playing at his best. NBA is better when Kyrie is on the floor. Like, these are players people play to see, that you're excited when they're showing their wizardry, on the hardwood. So I feel like I want the Nets to get it together so we can see them, at their best and playing high-level basketball. Do you think that way at all, Noah?
Yeah, I agree. From a neutral perspective, it would be neat to see. I just think it's like a more and more improbable because there are such a wide variety of issues that need to be fixed to get to that point. I think with Ben Simmons in particular, he's regressed pretty steeply from the player he was in his prime when he was a third-team All-NBA selection, and now
it's 25 years old, bro.
Yeah, he scores 10 points in a 30-point loss to the Kings, and the read from most folks is this is an upgrade. He's being efficient. He's showing occasional flashes of aggression in this backup center role, coming off the bench. Of course, a large amount of this is the injuries. The knee appears to be a quite significant issue. Obviously, the incident with the back injury in Milwaukee was, I think, more severe than anyone understood at the time and has continued to have these lingering effects. And we can all also see that the non-physical side of this remains quite big. And he just hasn't been able to restore that confidence, that rhythm, that sense of, I'm an all-star level player. And those sort of guys tend to attack the paint and tend to believe in themselves. Like, that self-belief seems to have vanished in large part due to this long layoff and some of the mental performance, mental health issues that have been well documented. So it's a tough spot for him, and he has to, if he's healthy, return to Philadelphia rather soon. So that's not going to be a pleasant scene for him. But as we talked about, I think once or twice before, that might be a nice ripping the Band-Aid off sort of experience for him. He's had the sitting on the bench part of that, and the Nets made that night, I think, a bit easier for him by crushing the Sixers last year. And now maybe he gets the experience in uniform. But the way things are looking now, you figure the Sixers will have a good chance to win that game over Brooklyn, whether or not Ben Simmons is a participant. So yeah, to kind of go back to where you started, I don't think there's a great chance the Nets turn it around based on how things look. I think they're one of those teams you can't ever count out entirely just because of the sheer talent of Irving, Durant, but they are in a very undesirable spot, I think, compared to most of the NBA. This is just not where you want to be with this much off-court tumultuous stuff, and I think a 6-9 record right now isn't looking too great either. I think the Miami Heat, if we're looking at turnaround candidates, they're 7-8. I think there's quite a decent chance that they improve on that considerably and remain a real threat in the Eastern Conference playoffs. But the Brooklyn Nets, the confidence level on my end right now can't be especially high.
Yeah, and it's upsetting because, we're basketball fans. Like I said, we want to be engaged in a lot of these games. And, you just love to see the progression and the growth from these teams. You mentioned, the injury thing, and you have guys like Simmons who can't seem to find the footing and on their way back. And you have guys like Klay Thompson who he's just screaming, to be what he was, and so desires to, reclaim what he's lost and things like that. And you kind of see that passion with Simmons. It doesn't exude quite the same way, but you just want to see him reclaim, what he was in order to, bring back that competitiveness and the excitement. And definitely clearly looking like the Sixers won this trade, and credit to Daryl Morey for making the move and getting Harden in here, because hopefully when he gets back on the floor, this first full season with the team can pay the dividends they're hoping for.
Yeah, it's looking like the Sixers might come out of the trade feeling pretty decent, but these things do often take unexpected turns. So, I don't personally want to make any premature declarations, but yeah, I understand that perspective quite well. And yeah, I think it's just hard to have much faith in Ben Simmons returning to what he was based on the evidence thus far. And yeah, you can chalk some of it up to anyone coming off a long layoff. It's rare that they're immediately going to be the exact same player, but it does feel like the issues with him are deeper than the typical person in this situation, because there are multiple physical issues, and there's the new team integration and just new teammate chemistry issues. And then there's also the mental performance side of it, which has long been a concern. And the elephant in the room of the jump shot, is now 2 or 3 elephants in size, seemingly, because it just hasn't gone away, and it feels like it is now a bigger issue than ever the longer it stays there for Ben Simmons. So he's in a really tough spot and does have some natural talent that could allow him to dramatically shift this narrative, but right now it's not looking too pretty for him or the Brooklyn Nets. And we'll see if they can pull off a turnaround and sort of draw some of those more favorable comparisons to last year's Celtics, but not the way things are looking right now.
Yeah, in essence, the Kyrie thing was a great distraction for people, trying to put Ben Simmons and what he's doing under the microscope. But nonetheless, people, the way he's been moved around out of the starting lineup, playing backup center and whatnot, it feels like Kyrie's absence would be the perfect opportunity to have him bringing the ball up the floor. But that's just not where they are right now. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Tomorrow, the Milwaukee Bucks are the topic du jour for the 76ers. What are you expecting before we get out of here, and how do you feel this one might play out, Noah?
Yeah, I think the start might not be too pretty for the Sixers. Doc Rivers is already
Whenever
sort
you
of,
give that little grimace, I know something is coming next. But,
yeah, Doc Rivers, I think, is already sort of pre-writing that excuse, and it's not an invalid one, that it's rare that you have this long of a layoff during a season, and teams in this position do usually start slow, and it's impossible to replicate game intensity and game conditioning and game rhythm. Sixers are doing their best. They're scrimmaging more than they do during usual practices, but this might be again a spot where the Sixers have to come from behind against Milwaukee, who is an 11-3 team and is not an easy opponent to beat. Looked like last night, Brooke Lopez, was especially hot, knocked down 7 3-pointers. So from the Sixers' perspective, they'll say, okay, he's not going to do that again, surely, and maybe we'll get some good fortune with him taking and missing some threes, and that playing into the Sixers' hands a little bit with them not wanting to extend Joel Embiid well beyond the three-point line defensively, more than they have to. So tough matchup for the Sixers. I would not be surprised if they drop this game, but the way they're playing right now, defensively, that gives them a chance, I think, to be competitive in any situation. I think you'll like Joel Embiid with the ball in his hands down the stretch, but this is not an easy matchup, and it might be the Sixers again failing to rise above 500. Obviously, if they're able to win this game, get to 8-7, a lot of reasons to feel really positive about the trajectory of this team. And I don't think that all suddenly goes down the drain if they lose it, but you definitely want to see them sustain, I think, the defensive intensity, the defensive precision, and also not need to just hop on Joel Embiid's shoulders. You'd hope that some other players chip in here offensively, regardless of whether Embiid is, again, surpassing 40 points or what have you.
Start of a tough stretch for the 76ers, but the national spotlight will be on South Philly tomorrow as the Bucks come to town, and then they play the back-to-back again after a 4-day layoff with the Timberwolves, and then on Tuesday and Wednesday it's the Nets and the Hornets. So a bit of a tough stretch, and then they're back at it on Friday right after Thanksgiving. So tough stretch for the 76ers. Keep it here for all of the updates and information on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, the Sixers Talk podcast, and make sure you follow Noah Levick and Danny Pommells on all your social media platforms. We appreciate you listening to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmy works for Noah and Ben. I'm Danny. We'll see you next time.